There we are. How you all doing? Don
Hey, welcome to my
Klinghoffer,
house.
RJ Milnor, David Green, just like that. I've been looking forward to this for a while, and now it's actually happening. So thank you both for joining David and myself. David, as you know, is in London. I'm here in Santa Cruz, underslept, but I'll deal with it. Don, how you doing? You want to introduce yourself, and then we'll give RJ a chance.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dawn Klinghoffer, and I lead people analytics at Microsoft.
RJ?
It's great to see you again, Don. And hi, everyone. My name is RJ Milnor. I lead people analytics at Uber.
Yeah, absolutely. And who's that other guy?
And I'm David Green. And I'm tired, but not as tired as you are.
Hey, well, yeah, we're going to bring this home. We've been going for 3 days. David whispered in my ear before we started. Al, can we do 2 days next time? Which we might do. But it is an important discussion that I'd like to have with you and David. I'm sorry, you and Don and RJ, because we're at a very wild time, disruptive time, and we have a unique opportunity and responsibility as people analytics leaders to add value to our organizations. And you having not only been veterans of the people analytics space and have been not only drinking the Kool-Aid, but making the Kool-Aid for a long time, I'd like to say, you have been veteran PAFOW contributors. And so you have some perspective on what this community is all about. So, Don, I want to start with you. What is your priority given COVID-19, and particularly how it relates to taking care of people and as well as the business at the same time?
So, in terms of what our kind of Uber North Star goal is, the health and safety of our employees. Obviously, that's kind of number one for Microsoft. And then within that, kind of making sure that we are listening to our employees, listening to our managers, helping to feed that information to our centers of excellences. So our program teams, the ones that are creating the programs to help people through this pandemic. And we've been doing that. We looked yesterday when we started listening to employees, and it was March 6th. That's when we really kind of went full force and said, we need to understand what's going on. So that has been kind of job one, but there's been so many other ancillary priorities for us in terms of hiring, in terms of understanding just how we can help our real estate and facilities team on what we're calling the return to the work site. Some people, you kind of read return to work. Well, we're all working, so it's not that. But what does it look like if and when people start returning to the work site? And so there's been many priorities that have come out of COVID, and on top of the health and safety of our employees.
Yeah, Don, saying with you before we go over to RJ is that you have been at Microsoft for a number of years, and we talked earlier today about the critical need to develop relationship equity, and it sounds like you have processes that just evolved given the crisis. You didn't have to create a new set of relationships. Is that right? Can you speak to how you have just chopped wood for a long time and developed these relationships, so now, given the crisis, you can already access and facilitate change?
Yeah, I mean, we've been at this for a long time. I've been working in people analytics for 17 years. And so obviously over those 17 years, I've developed many relationships. I spent 5 years before that in finance. I kept my finance relationships, developed other relationships. There's a huge analytics community within Microsoft. And it's amazing especially during this pandemic, how many people have kind of come out of the woodwork and wanting to help and wanting to understand what's going on. And so we've just developed more relationships and more partnerships through all of this. But definitely we can't do it alone. We can't sit in our silo and solve these types of problems by ourselves. We need to have those relationships across the corporation in order to be successful.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. And RJ, where's your energy and priorities right now, given what's happening with COVID-19?
Yeah, I think Dawn said it so well that the health and safety of our employees is the first priority. And we were joking earlier in the week and last week that it feels like we're leading parallel lives in so many ways. And so ensuring that our employees are safe, that their well-being is high is first. We went 100% remote very, very quickly. But when we think about that, it's how do we ensure that our employees are safe, but also they're being as productive as they can be. And when we think about the role people analytics plays in that, from the very basics, so do employees have a channel to get in touch with us? So if you think about very early on in the COVID-19 crisis, there's some mechanics at play, right? So do we have a way for employees to get in touch with us if they have questions about what COVID-19 is, the impact that it could have? This is even before going remote and work from home. So things like an inbox, ticketing systems to make sure the questions get to the right place, setting up dashboards to understand the volume of those, and if the quickness with which we're answering those questions and resolving those cases. So it's very transactional, right? As the situation evolved, it became much more about understanding how people are doing and how we can help and develop the right policy responses. And so that's when people analytics, I think, really starts to hit its stride, and we start to tap into things like continuous listening. And so one of the things that we did fairly recently was expand our normal pulse surveying into a way of really understanding how our employees doing right now. So not just their well-being, but what's the sustainability of their current situation, and are there pockets that we really need to understand better? So as an example, the caregiver population is one that has very specific challenges that we can dig into. We can understand in our own population who the folks are doing pretty well, who are the folks that might need more attention and more care, and what specific policy responses do we need to develop, or how do we need to help our managers, and how do we need to help our fellow employees take care of each other during this time. So the continuous listening piece was really important for us. And then building on what Dawn mentioned, we can also use our analytic capabilities to understand how can we all be more productive during this time. Not just productive in terms of work. And we're actually finding that some work functions are increasingly productive working from home. But how do we use our time more productively? How can we maximize our engagement through these new tools, or the tools at least that we're using more often? So maximizing engagement through the social tools while we're being physically distanced. And I think the last thing that that Dawn mentioned is return to work planning. So as we think about going back into the offices and doing that in a phased manner, how do we do that in the best possible way? And not just in a way that maximizes our business critical positions, but also in the way that takes care of the employees that need to get back first, for whatever reason that might be, and the ones that honestly can't. And using data and what employees are telling us, really listening to them to be able to make those decisions in a data-driven way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you for sharing, RJ. And David, similar question, but nuanced. You're obviously with Insight222 in touch with a lot of people analytics leaders and their priorities and what their anxiety is around their particular situation. So what do you see people analytics leaders doing, focusing on? Because as RJ said, and Blair Hopkins said it yesterday or day before yesterday, we're at this stage, it's like, so many people are at home, they're working, their calendars are filling up. We actually heard that again this morning. It seems like we're doing more, but in some cases we're not getting as much done because we have these sometimes family needs and other things that we have to take care of, and obviously looking out for our health. So, what are you saying?
I mean, some of this, obviously, a lot of the stuff that Dawn and RJ have said, certainly from a listening perspective, there's a lot of surveying going on, and the emphasis seems to be shifting from engagement to well-being, and connectedness. To people have the tools they need to actually work. It's interesting, a couple of organizations we've spoken to have been doing analysis on things like town halls, calls to HR and service centers, IT, and to really understand what are the main themes that employees are speaking about, and actually then designing surveys to dig a little bit deeper around that. And I wouldn't be surprised if Dawn and RJ hadn't been doing similar things around that. Interesting, when we had a call last week with some of our clients, one organization talked about how they picked up from their listening that some of their people that were at home were actually concerned they couldn't get food. They couldn't get out to the supermarket for whatever reason. So they actually listened to that, and they started organizing food parcels for them to either pick up or to be delivered. So I think there is that sense of well-being and understanding health and safety really being the primary. We're starting to see now in the panel that we had on Tuesday with Blair and Isabel and Gitanjali, we were talking about this, and you're quite right to phrase it like that, Dawn, return to the office rather than return to work. And all the sort of nuances that come into that, where you've got operations that are dealing with the public, for example, like in retail, you've got to think about things like social distancing within the stores. You've got to think about putting in visors and stuff like that, so there's a barrier between people behind the counter and customers. And you've got to think about that in the office as well. So those considerations that RJ talked to about, who returns first, and thinking all the different nuances around that, really. Is it caregivers, for example, who are finding it very difficult to work from home, once schools hopefully start to reopen? So I think that, and again, I think you talked to a little bit yesterday, Al, and I think we see it with the mature functions like obviously Microsoft and Uber. People analytics teams have never been so busy. But in other organizations that maybe haven't established that stakeholder equity, the people analytics teams aren't getting involved. And I think that's quite sad. I know from IBM, I mean, their people analytics team, the financial crisis really put them on the map 10 or 12 years ago. And I think that, this could put some of the teams that have been, as Dawn and I were talking last week, some of the teams that have been established in the last 3 to 5 years, really put them on the map in their organizations, which, is good for the field. We all wish that it didn't been a crisis like this that helped that to happen, but, it is certainly putting people analytics on them, definitely.
Well, thanks for that, David. And, Don, going back to you, we, in the midst of this crisis, I keep saying wait, we're really in it. So, I want to be respectful, and we, just so you two know, we have set the stage early on that we are, going to be as compassionate and acknowledge the struggles that people are going through. We're also going to try and do our best to elevate the energy and bring ideas to the fore that will hopefully help the organization and the individuals within it. So with that in mind, Dawn, one of the things that I have been impressed with you with over the years is that you picked up very early on that people analytics isn't just for executives, it's for the broader workforce. And you have since empowered managers. Can you speak to what you're doing right now, particularly with COVID-19 going on, to empower your managers and the broader workforce?
Yeah, so one of the focus areas for us is to really help our managers. So this past summer, we rolled out a new manager expectations. They're model, coach, and care. Those are the 3 manager expectations that we have. And so through this pandemic, it's like, how can we help our managers model, coach, and care? And so not only are we listening to employees through our listening system, we also have specific questions to our managers and to understand what our managers need. In addition to that, when we do our sentiment analysis, we look at what the employees are saying, and then we look at what the managers are saying. And ironically, they're saying a lot of the same things. But one of the interesting insights that we've gotten from our listening systems is just the importance of prioritization. Okay, making sure that managers are prioritizing the work for their employees, and that also leaders are prioritizing the work for their managers. And so that's what's super, super important. And it drives what we've seen is it actually drives work-life balance. When your managers can prioritize the work for you, you will actually your balance will be better. And that's another aspect that we're looking at very closely through this pandemic, is not just how productive people are, but how is it impacting their work-life balance? Because what we've seen largely through workplace analytics is that everyone is more productive right now. Everyone is spending more time on their computers. They're spending more time in emails. They're spending more time chats. Well, that's because there isn't a work site anymore where you can just stop by someone's office and you can talk to them at the water cooler or on the way to a meeting. And so now everyone is connecting with one another online. And so while that digital exhaust is increasing, how is it impacting employees' perception of work-life balance? And so that's another reason, or another way, that we're really trying to help our employees and managers and provide them with guidance on how to help them through this situation.
Thanks for that, Don. And RJ, I want to toss that over to you. And we also talked about how this is affecting the people analytics operating model. And are these shifts in the operating model, the way we work, and the audience that we're serving, are these shifts going to be the way forward? Or is it just going to a temporary ebb in how we do things? What are your thoughts there, RJ?
Yeah, two great questions. If you don't mind, I'll tackle both of them in order. First, in terms of the how we're enabling managers, I think in business as usual, in normal operating conditions, we have this wonderful synergy between listening, so employee survey programs, continuous listening, and then how we operationalize that work, right? Whether it's sending dashboards and data out to managers down to the field level and analysis, to what we build in our learning systems, even to policy level responses across the company. What we're seeing right now during COVID is that all of that is becoming even more cogent. So things are happening more quickly, and the response is, I think, even faster. So as an example, one of the things that I mentioned, that our survey to employees in terms of their well-being and sustainability, we stood that up in, I think, 3.5 days on a global survey, and got that back, and then got the results back in a week, and then started to work on it. So everything is happening a lot more quickly. But what we were able to do is get that information back out, incorporate it into information on the learning development side to help our managers, then also get information directly out to our employees about what we were doing in the global all hands. In fact, we were just discussing that with our global workforce on Tuesday. So the ability for us to act quickly and get information into not only our managers' hands, but into our employees' hands quickly, everything is just accelerating. And to your second point, I think that is how our operating model is changing, and I think that will become the new normal. Is the rapidity and the shortened cycle time. It's what we're discovering about ourselves and what we can do. Internally, we harken back to what we used to call the Uber hustle. This is what's becoming what we're calling hustle with heart. We're finding kind of that hustle that we always had, but it's a hustle with a renewed sense of purpose. It's a purpose that we're a mission-driven company. We've always have been. That's who we are. But it's a renewed sense of purpose, and we're finding ways that we move with a sense of alacrity and purpose and speed. That's really new, and it's really invigorating. And we're seeing that kind of across the company. But I think that is the new operating model for us, and it's the new speed. The other thing that we're seeing, besides just the cycle time and rapidity and the purpose, is the cross-functional collaboration from an operating model perspective. If I just use that one example of our COVID survey, we stood that up extremely quickly in terms of the design, the launch, the turn back, the analysis, the communication. But that wasn't done in a silo in people analytics. That was with a tremendous amount of collaboration across functions. If you think about who was involved with that, it's D&I, it's employee relations, it's legal, it's HRBPs. Everybody was in that and contributing to it and supporting it. That's, I think, also the new model, is that things don't happen in silos. It's extremely collaborative, but it's a collaborative fast. So everybody has agency and everybody gets behind it and supports it. The last thing I think is that when we think of the stakeholders of people analytics, and many of us have stakeholder models, right? So we understand who the groups are that we're engaging with. Senior executives and employees both are becoming increasingly important stakeholders. And I think that will continue to grow and evolve. And so certainly senior executives have always been important stakeholders. For employees are perhaps a group that people analytics functions have done a lot for or about in the past. Now I really see employees being a stakeholder at the table just as much as other stakeholders.
Thanks for that, RJ. And I want to remind viewers that you're welcome to submit your questions via Slido at the conference hub at PAFOW.net. David, your thoughts on serving managers and the evolution of the operating model for people analytics?
Well, I think the speed that RJ referred to, we've heard during the conference. Isabel Nadeau from FIS talked about how they'd stood up a new virtual onboarding process in a weekend. I know that it's out there publicly that Novartis and Dawn will like this. Novartis had previously had a 2-year plan to roll out Teams across the organization. They did it in 2 weeks, right at the start of the crisis. One people analytics leader I spoke to last week said that because of the capacity demand on his team, they'd switched off 900 reports to the business, and they'd only been asked to switch back on around 10% of those. So things are definitely happening much faster than they were before. And as Dawn quite rightly said, it's all very well doing listening, and but you need to get the actions taken, and you need to get those insights to managers and to leaders to enable them to take action. And I think what's again good is that people analytics teams, a couple of people analytics teams that I've spoken to have talked about how, when they've been measuring the sentiment and going out to employees, they're finding that when leaders are communicating more often and when leaders are being honest, that's really generating a positive response. So this whole thing that Josh spoke to yesterday around trust being at the central part of the response that organizations need to take. And it's good to see that people analytics teams are finding that is actually, the case within their organization. So yeah, it'd be interesting if, to your question now, if things will go back to normal. Artists, I don't think things will ever be the same again in any walk of life. And I think that things are going to happen more quickly, and hopefully we'll start not doing things that maybe don't matter. Both as certainly both personally, but also more importantly in professional lives. People analytics teams constantly being asked for reports and pieces of data about stuff that that's really make sure that we're doing important work that helps our workforces.
Well, thanks for that, David, and it's a great segue over to Dawn. Dawn, are you aware of any good maybe remote working software or tools that people could use to help with this?
It's so funny that you ask that. Okay, so I'm going to tell a little story before I give the punchline. my parents are on the East Coast, and we don't all use the same technology for our phones. Okay. And so we can't FaceTime them. And but they've really wanted to see us on camera. And it's like, oh my God, but that's what I do all day long in Teams. And I welcome actually getting on a phone these days, because it's not what I do all day. So yes, Teams has kept us incredibly, incredibly productive. And you feel like you're just with everyone. I mean, we have virtual happy hours. We have lots of team connections in terms of brainstorming sessions, because we can use whiteboards on Teams, and there's polling features on Teams. And every day it seems like there's a new feature that's coming out. And I yesterday I was commenting on, oh my gosh, we just hired a new leader on my team, and she must think we're crazy because we get so excited about every little feature that comes out, because we are obsessed with Teams. So we've had a lot of fun with it, and we've had a lot of fun kind of testing the boundaries, and oh wow, does Microsoft feel empowered? All employees feel empowered to give lots of feedback to our product teams on what's working well and what's not working well. So that's also been very interesting. But yeah, I don't know what we would do without Teams. The other aspect of Teams is the social aspect. So we have, on my team right now, we started this almost a month ago, 2 truths and a lie. And so one person will go and give 2 truths and a lie, and people will kind of chime in and guess what it is. And after a day or two, the person will let you know what the answers are, and kind of share some, the stories about what they put. And so people are really getting to know each other better. And that's all just through the Teams chatter. We're not talking to one another during all of this, but you can look at it, at 6 o'clock when you need a little laugh before you log off for the day. So it's been quite incredible to see how Teams has enabled us to work seamlessly as we have transitioned into this 100% fully remote work life.
Well, fantastic story, and thank you for sharing. I'm actually going to stick with you on that, because your colleague, Carly Scott Murphy, did an outstanding job, unsurprisingly, this morning. And obviously, all this technology, all this activity on Teams and other platforms are generating data. And you have, as Microsoft, created a trust center years ago, which I have served me as a resource when GDPR was being thought about. And it's like you have built a lot of trust on how you manage data. Can you speak to that trust building that you've done, and how this is shedding light on what the employee experience is and how it's shifted?
I mean, the trust comes with giving employees empowerment with their data. Okay, so being very transparent. I've talked about this before at PAFOW, but there's 3 pillars that we consider in terms of building employee trust, and that's transparency, value, and purpose. And you have to think of all 3 of those aspects in order to make sure that you are continuing to think about the employee and put the employee at the center of all of this. And so, from the beginning, we were very transparent with our employees about the fact that we have this tool called Workplace Analytics, and it looks at the digital exhaust from email, from calendar, metadata. It also now takes into consideration Teams, which is obviously a large source of information for us. But we're not looking at people's chats back and forth. We're not looking at the body of the emails. We're looking just at the subject line. And to be honest, we've never even really done much with the subject lines because it hasn't necessarily been relevant to the work that we've done. And that also builds employee trust when you can be very clear about what you're doing with people's data. And then also to be able to follow up with them afterwards. what we've been doing, as I talked about, kind of empowering managers, our head of HR has been sending out a mail about every 2 weeks to provide guidance to managers. And many of the insights that we're getting are in these mails, and we share them with people so that they can see, oh, wow, okay, so you have access to our data, but this is what we're getting from it. So making sure that the managers are seeing the value from it on the other side. I would say that maybe Microsoft is a little bit more progressive in terms of being comfortable in this type of world where people are leveraging each other's data. But again, even at Microsoft, we have to think, that's why we created the governance process that we did. We have to constantly think about the fact that would employees feel good about this? Okay, would employees feel good about the work that we're doing? Just because we can do it doesn't mean we should do it. And so we constantly have to remind ourselves that.
Yeah, well, thank you. And as I come back up here, I'll just show you that thinking about you, I got my Don Klinghoffer team, sticker on my computer here. RJ, your thoughts, and in a broader step back, I mean, reference social network analytics or organizational network analytics there, is that the crisis has created the need to generate new data. In some cases, to your point, you spun up a survey. Yes, in some other cases, more broadly, we're being asked to download apps and report how we're feeling and who we've been exposed to. There's geolocation data that's being used. So my question is for you, what data do you want to go get that you don't have right now? Where do you see this going in terms of the frequency in which we are dialoguing with the workforce?
So I think the frequency with which we dialogue, we have a little more latitude than we may have had in the past. We're being thoughtful about how often we want to ping the workforce. And so if we're looking at, say, census surveys, we want to be thoughtful that the ask is clear and the what's in it for the employee is very clear as well. But we do think there's a little more latitude on that if we try to balance survey fatigue versus the amount of times we're going out, especially on kind of the well-being front, or if we're asking them something that's very specific to an area that's important to them, right? On the other areas that we're trying to collect data, honestly, there's not much that's changed, certainly in our operating principles. I think what you just heard from Dawn is that the values by which we operate and the governance, really, that hasn't changed. We want to be transparent with employees. We are transparent with employees. There's a governance model that we need to run everything through. And so all of those things remain consistent. And so it's a great question, Al, that you're asking. But in terms of how we actually look at data, how we're going about it, it's not that there's we need all this more, volumes of more data to be able to run the business or take care of our employees. There are some things, there are edge cases that we'll need to understand, and we're going to be really transparent with employees about what those things are, especially in regards to health and safety. But other than that, the way that we actually do our business and the way that we look at data governance and data privacy, I think it's particularly important that we're not changing the way that we govern those things and communicate to employees about those things. If anything, we're even increasingly transparent about those, and that our models around data governance, the way that we approach privacy and ethics, all those things remain extremely consistent. That's the reason why we have governance, is to ensure that we're not kind of maneuvering around edge cases. And so, we have a data governance board, for instance, that raises requests. That we look at both. To Don mentioned, do we want something showing up on the front page of a newspaper? Is this the right thing to do? Does it align with our values as a company? And then also, we run things through all of our appropriate stakeholders and SMEs as well. So I don't think a lot of the way that we treat data is changing.
Yeah, and you mentioned governance, and sticking with you, is that has that shifted given COVID-19? And for example, many organizations have talked about over the last 3 days is the need for task forces, that they did not have certain groups meeting, or if they did, now they're meeting with greater frequency. Has that shifted in any way in either the frequency of the meetings or people who are in the room?
Oh, sure. So I think we probably both answered that we are in a lot more meetings a lot more often than we were a month or 2 months ago. And so, yes, there are a lot more task forces because there's a lot more to do. Right. So when you think about, I think the way that both of us answered the very first question you asked, the health and well-being of our employees is the top priority right now. And if we think about kind of what that means, there are a lot of work streams associated with that. And so it is important that a lot of people get involved. And so when we think about committees to handle that kind of work, yeah, there's a lot of work to do, right? And there's going to be a lot of data that's required to handle that work. That's why consistent governance is so important. At least from my perspective, is that when things do get fast and when the requests do get heavy, you can't have kind of one person making ad hoc decisions about what data goes out and who answers what and who gets what. That's the virtue of a governance process. And if something does need to shift, it needs to be done thoughtfully and done with a lot of consideration. And so having governance in place, especially for smaller companies or companies that are going through a lot of growth, that governance allows, frankly, that governance, which might seem more bureaucratic or something, that's an extra layer or it slows us down, it actually allows us to move more quickly because we can move at scale. We don't have to make the same decision 20 times and have the risk of it being answered different ways. We can have a way of making that same decision in terms of its data provision or data use or data retention or whatever it might be. We can make that decision once, and then we can deploy that decision 1,000 times consistently and know we're doing it the right way.
I mean, I could, we're good friends, so I can say this without hesitation. I could jump through the screen and hug you for saying that, because it is a case where governance has been kind of a bad word. It's like, I don't want to go bureaucracy. It's actually, to your point, enable scale. And Don referred to it earlier as kind of around the relationship equity and the need to understand the repercussions and what needs to be done leading up to a project and so forth. So, David, obviously you work with more European companies than the US, although you are a global brand. You are famous, my friend. My perspective is this, or my question rather is this, is that as we go in the wake of COVID-19, and there will be a wake to it, and the theme of this session has been what's next for people analytics. What do you see as next, or what would you like to see happen with the discipline, David?
Well, I suppose that's a whole question, isn't it? I think the stuff that RJ and Dawn just said, we need to put people data for good at the center of the profession, really. And I actually think that pretty much everyone I've met who works in the people analytics space genuinely believes in that. To Dawn's words, just because we can doesn't mean we should. It's interesting that some of the data you talked about, new data in the previous question now, and a lot of the data that we actually already have in organizations we're not necessarily using. It's tools like workplace analytics, and we heard from Manish Goul earlier as well. Tools that actually help you look passively at some of the network data in a safe way, in an aggregated way, in an anonymized way, can help you pick out themes that you could then use to do active surveys on. So I think hopefully we'll start to see more use of passive data, but in an ethical way, of course. I think that what this does is we've, in people analytics for at least the last year and probably a lot more, we've been talking a lot about this whole piece around skills for the future. Well, the future's here, and COVID-19 has accelerated it even further. So I think we're going to be doing a lot more work around, this shape. What does the organization look like now? What does it look like in a year, 2, 3 years time? And understanding, what are the skills that we need and where do we have them? And suddenly into the mix comes the fact that actually a lot of the work that we thought we needed to do in the office, some people are actually prefer to do it from home, and they can be just as productive, and we can collaborate just as well because the technology is there and it's accelerating all the time. So I think it opens up a whole new host of questions for people analytics teams. And then the world's going to look a very different place when we come out of this crisis, and that's going to create a lot of challenges, opportunities for organizations, and you'd like to think that people analytics teams will be there. I think the work that we're doing is being elevated higher within the organization more often, and we're involved in those discussions. So hopefully that will continue, and I'm sure it will, certainly in Dawn's and RJ's organizations, but surely in lots of others around the world as well.
Yeah, if I'm good job empathizing with the listeners, many might be sitting back and go, well, that's Dawn Klinghoffer, that's RJ Milnor, that's Microsoft, that's Uber, and they have these resources, they've been at it for a long time. So Dawn, one question, but I'm actually going to make it two, so forgive me up front. So where do you see this discipline evolving to for you there at Microsoft, but also more broadly? In other words, if you were going to coach somebody, given the state of the world right now, where would you have them focus? And just to add another layer on there, I think you'll agree, if I asked that question 10 years ago, the answer would be different. If I even go back further in time, it'd be different. Even if I went back, 12 months, it would probably be different given the array of tools and data sets and certainly priorities, state of the market, both the labor market and the greater economy. So what do you see happening there at Microsoft, as well as how would you advise others in terms of where the discipline is going?
I think it's an easier question to answer these days than it was, years ago. I think that, in terms of Microsoft, where is it going? So I'm going to push on analytics at scale. That's what I think that's where I think the future is going, is how can we do more with less? Meaning, how can we get more scale out of what we're doing? How can we build more machine learning models to do what we're doing? And how can we use technology to empower the employees and empower managers? And so that's where I see the future, for at least at Microsoft, is more analytics at scale. We're learning so much just to watch my organization and how we work together. We call it one HRBI. That's what we will say. While I have four teams within my organization, those teams rely on each other daily to be successful. And the newest team that I've just kind of reorganized my team around is this team around analytics at scale, to enable the 3 other teams to do more with less. If I had to talk to someone that was just starting out, I would say, wow, COVID gives you an unbelievable opportunity to showcase the value of people analytics, even just in its simplest form, to listen to what employees need during this time, and to be able to do the analysis that shows people that will open their eyes up to what is possible. And so again, as I've said this before, choose one thing that's really important to leadership. I think right now is keeping people healthy and safe. And as RJ said, productive. But productivity can come at a cost. And so you want to make sure that is that's balanced productivity. But being able to highlight that, even if you have 1 or 2 resources working on that, I think would go a long way.
Thanks for that. RJ, same question to you. Where do you believe we should be going with our discipline there at Uber and more broadly?
Yeah, it's a great question, and huge +1 to what Dawn just mentioned about analytics at scale. That's a major initiative for us as well, in terms of how do we take something at the core, whether it's a product or an insight, and scale that across the organization, and that creates space to do the more bespoke or custom work. So whether it's to serve a part of the organization that's truly unique, or for a specific edge case or unique challenge that we're trying to work on. Yeah, we've talked about a lot of really cool applications of people analytics that are especially relevant to our employees and personally relevant to our employees right now, whether it's understanding their well-being and how to help them take care of themselves, looking at productivity through all kinds of means, whether we're looking at productivity data, O&A data, helping to balance productivity with work-life balance, because we are seeing in many cases, Don mentioned this as well, that employees are being more productive, but there's a balance of that, and it's a question of sustainability there as well, right? So there are all of these cases that we're looking at that involve different types of data sources, whether it's O&A, when we're looking at Teams data, whatever it might be. If we kind of wrap it up in terms of where this is going and what the current COVID situation might be highlighting, when I look at it, a big message is that people analytics is business analytics. And this is decision support that we need to move and build our company in so many ways. But it's also fundamental to who we are. Especially at PAFOW, we talk about people data for good. And that's one of the things that really distinguishes people analytics. It's the information that helps our people bring their whole selves to work, to grow and develop. And that's a really important mission, especially for mission-driven companies, which so many of us are. But it's not just the information that helps us be productive and drive the business forward. It helps us move our culture forward and really be who we want to be as a company. And we can't let go of that, because that's an essential part of what people analytics does. I think what this time that we're in also makes very clear is that while people analytics is business analytics, and we're seeing it help the company make important decisions, business analytics is not people analytics. And what I mean by that is that the challenge with people data, as so many of us know, is that it's complex and it's messy. It involves human behavior and psychology. There are different complexities in it in terms of how we handle the data, from a legal and compliance perspective, just being one of them, like we talked about. So the functions and the talent actually aren't always fungible. And we need to be aware of how people analytics is similar, and also how it's different than other analytics being done across the company. And so those are the things that I try to keep in mind when we think about people analytics, is that it's so important to the business. It is business analytics in so many ways. It's so important to who we are as a company, as a culture, and to our workforce and people. And that's something that I try to keep really close to my heart, but that it's not the same thing as all other kind of analytics that we're doing. There are some things that make it very different, and we can't lose sight of that, because those things are quite important.
Thanks for sharing. And I echo the people data for good mantra, certainly, for obvious reasons. David, comments? We have about 8 minutes left. We can go a little bit long if need be, but your impressions based on what was shared thus far with RJ and Don on that topic.
Well, definitely the people analytics at scale thing is the thing I hear most when I'm talking to peers of Dawn and RJ. And I think it's interesting actually, Thomas, as when he opened up, was it 2 days ago now? It was 2 days ago, from Australia. He talked about how they've, under him now at NAB, have combined employee experience, people analytics, and digital together. And he talked about how you need by putting those three together, you're able actually then to start delivering people analytics at scale, which I thought was interesting. I think you had a point as well, Al, around not everyone's got the team and the resources maybe that Dawn and RJ have, and other teams that have been established for a long time. But we had a great panel this morning, and Oliver Casper from Swarovski was on there. And these teams been going for about 3 years. In terms of people, they don't have that many, but what he has done there in terms of the stakeholder engagement with the business and other functions is incredible. And literally his strategy boils down to 3 things. Drive better sales with people analytics, because 10,000 of their 25,000 employees are working in retail, in their retail stores. The other 15,000 are in production. So how can we drive more quality and efficiency in production? And then how can people analytics drive culture across the organization? So those are the 3 key things that he and his team are working on. And I think it's kind of plays to what Dawn and RJ were saying, focus the efforts of the team on the business, engage with the right people in the business, both from a stakeholder perspective, but also work with other teams cross-functionally. And you can really deliver a lot of stuff and have a real impact on the business. And that's probably the building blocks you need to start be able to deliver things at scale.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, David. Now, as we start to wrap up, Dawn, I'd like to ask you for closing comments, keeping in mind that our audience are fellow people analytics professionals, HR professionals, and those people who are just interested in how people, data, and analytics are going to affect the future of work. Any tidbits of advice or just things to look out for, particularly in the wake of COVID-19?
Well, definitely productivity. I mean, that's what I think that is going to be really hot, particularly in the next year as we shift. Pretty much everyone is working remote. I don't think it will ever go back to the way it was before. And so how do you take that productivity data and you serve it up in ways that you can empower your employees and your managers to make really good decisions on it? I mean, we're lucky that we have the software at Microsoft, but it truly has been game changing in terms of the insights that we're able to get to help the organization. And so what I would say is leverage technology where you can, even if you don't have a big team. Understand the technology that you can utilize that will kind of give you an edge, okay? Give you a boost in terms of helping you deliver those types of insights to the business. And I'm thrilled that I want to thank you for inviting me today. Obviously, I wouldn't have been able to travel to the UK even before COVID happened. And so being able to bring us together globally, kind of using technology, I think is something that we should really think about for the future.
Thanks, Dawn. Appreciate that. RJ?
Yeah, and thanks for the question and the opportunity here, Al and David. I agree. I think where we're seeing the future of people analytics is that nexus between productivity and well-being, right? And it's almost a dual mandate of people analytics functions. So going back to the Swarovski example you mentioned, David, how do we drive business performance along with the well-being of our people, which is a really important mandate for all of us as organizations, right? So how do we drive the business forward, and how do we take care of the workforce that we have? And coming out of COVID, I totally agree with Dawn. We've got this amazing opportunity to understand and help our employees be more productive, and at the same time provide them with information, insights, and resources to help them be productive in the right way that helps their own well-being at the same time. And there's a tremendous amount of data we can bring to bear against that challenge. And so I think those are the things that I would counsel kind of all of us as a community to think about. And that might be one of the areas that people analytics really dives into moving forward. I'd also say, and this is a mantra that we've been talking about for years, stay focused on business objectives, right? So if we think about productivity and well-being, how do we use those two things in support of our business objectives, whatever they might be, for every organization, and stay really aligned to those items. But those would be kind of my closing comments. And I also like just to thank and congratulate both of you, Al and David, for putting this together. and doing it virtually. It's a huge lift. And thank you for giving all of us the opportunity, both Don and me, and all of us online, the opportunity to get together and share ideas virtually. It's a huge lift moving this from in person to virtual, and I'm really grateful that you did it.
It's kind of you, RJ, and really appreciate you getting up early as you did, Don, to share. And yeah, I my heart goes out to you and your families, and look forward to getting together, getting some human connection, seeing each other in 3 dimensions before too long. So know you're greatly appreciated, David. Thanks for contributing. David, any final words for RJ and Don?
Well, thank you. I mean, it's been good to get to know you both over the years, and you continue to inspire with your work and your words. So, and it's great that you are prepared to share that work with so many people. I think in the space, it really helps.
Yeah, agreed. Well, you two be well, and again, hope to see you very soon. Yeah, wishing you the best.
You too. Thank you.
Take care. Look forward to it.
Take care.